So how should young researchers think about balancing the publication pressures, like you mentioned, with meaningful impact?
Once you strengthen your basic understanding and once you get good idea about context you are trying to work, the pipeline will follow afterward. So my goal was not to actually publish per se. My goal was to understand social issues and contribute to addressing those social issues.
What advice would you give to Indian management community?
Enormous knowledge and indigenous skills, yet they are marginalized by mainstream. In fact, many policymakers even don't go to those contexts before they design a solution or a policy.
Welcome, Professor Israr, to this podcast at IMT Hyderabad. Could you start by telling us about your journey into academia?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate being at IMT here. My previous life was a geologist, so I've been to many parts of India as a geologist, and I have seen various social issues, marginalization, poverty, healthcare issues, and I always used to think how we can overcome these issues. But as a geologist, I didn't have enough tools to understand and make sense of it. So I thought I will go to an academic institution where I can learn about various theories, various approaches, various models which can help me understand various issues which I are seeing in India in rural context. That was the first step towards initiating an academic journey.
So were there any initial experiences which drew you specifically towards management research?
Partly yes and partly no, because at the point when I was thinking of doing research in marginalized context and social issues, I was more thinking towards the development studies. But then I realized that in terms of resource, management literature can be much more powerful to see where resource can be mobilized and used. So I was in two state of mind whether to go do development studies or to do management studies. And then eventually I thought probably with my background in long-term IT implementation in GSI, management might be much more closer discipline for me to start my academic journey.
So what does research impact mean to you as an individual?
I really think a lot about research impact, and in my entire last 2 decades of research, I always strive towards trying to do research which can have direct impact on social issues and marginalization. In fact, if you see my academic trajectory, my initial academic life, there wasn't many publication, primarily because I was engaging deeply into social issues and marginalized context, which are not easy to understand and much difficult to publish in management discipline during those times. And eventually, engaging with almost 85 plus social enterprises globally, I was able to understand it's more important to address the issues first, and then if you are able to address some of those issues, some of those learning can be packaged into academic journal publication, and then we can publish it. So my goal was not to actually publish per se. My goal was to understand social issues and contribute to addressing those social issues. And if something can be publishable, I can then think of publishing. So publication was the second thought.
It's very insightful. So much of your research is deeply grounded in marginalized and underserved context. So what has fieldwork in such settings taught you?
It taught me my own limitations. It taught me my own constraints. I had to relearn many things which I had forgotten. I come from very poor background to start with. So at those times I was very familiar with those issues and those constraints. But eventually, after getting a job and moving to various places, I got used to a more comfortable life. When I went back to those contexts again, I realized how difficult it was for me to be able to manage my routine things in those contexts. I'm talking about as marginalized context as not having toilets or not having basic infrastructure. So it took me some while to get used to those highly resource constraint thing. But eventually I went beyond my own constraint and started looking at the constraint on the communities. And then I realized many times they have enormous knowledge and indigenous skills, yet they are marginalized by mainstream media, mainstream policymakers. In fact, many policymakers even don't go to those contexts before they design a solution or a policy. So I learned from interacting with those people how much wealth in terms of local knowledge they have, how humble they are, how much they are willing to share with you not only knowledge but their limited resources. They are, might be resource poor, but they have much bigger heart than most of us can ever have.
This is very, very insightful. So your work overall emphasizes a lot of social impact through theoretical contributions. So how should young researchers think about balancing the publication pressures, like you mentioned, with meaningful impact?
I won't be able to say much about Indian context because I'm not very much aware of institutional policies in India, but I'm taking much a broader picture globally, for example. I always tell doctoral students and early career researcher, you should focus on doing high impact, grounded research without considering immediately about publication aspect. Because once you strengthen your basic understanding and once you get good idea about context you are trying to work, the pipeline will follow afterward. But if you chase the publication first, you will never be able to develop those strengths which can help you publish in top tier journal. So journey from getting used to publishing poor quality journal to top journal is almost impossible. Journey from not having many publication initially, but having very strong background to then publishing more frequently is a bit easier than the other way around. So my advice to scholars are try to strengthen your foundational skills in the research rather than chasing publication initially.
What advice would you give to Indian management community as such and research community regarding what kind of topics and practices in research they should aim for?
I regularly come to India. In that sense, I give several seminars, mostly geared towards doctoral student and early career researcher, and I always emphasize this. You have enormous opportunity being part of a context which is as diverse as India is. There are various level of economic disparity, social disparity, inequality, and then even in terms of culture and geography, variety of context in different part of the country. If you use those contexts to build the existing theory or extend existing theory, there's much more possibility of publishing in top tier journal, which has been my approach always. More often than not, because we are so used to Western concept and Western models, we simply try to replicate them in Indian context. First of all, the context may not be amenable for replication, and secondly, if you just replicate an existing theory, you don't get a high impact publication. Contrary, if you leverage Indian context and Indian learning, you are able to either create all new theory, or at least you are able to extend existing theory, which has high probability of publishing top tier journals. So my advice to those scholars is get engaged in the context. Try to find what is nuanced in Indian context versus what we can borrow from Western context, and then try to build your theory or extend existing theory using strength of local context and novelty of local context.
Very well said. For doctoral students and early career researchers listening to this podcast, what habits, mindset, or practices would you strongly recommend developing early on in their careers?
Yes, those who are doctoral students, I think probably it's much easier for them because they are starting from very, very foundational aspect. And this is not my own idea. Many academics will say that develop a habit of writing regularly. Doesn't matter if it is not very impactful. If you have read something, summarize them by the end of the day. More importantly, if you are reading articles and if you still use physical media and not AI to summarize them, try to summarize each article in half a page in your language, not copying the abstract, but exactly in your language. Once you summarize those articles in your own language, when you are integrating the article, you can simply cut and paste that part because in your own language. And also it summarizes the article the way you think about it. So it's much easier to recall the article when you read this summary. So try to develop habit of whenever you read an article, summarize at least half page in your language. Then you can build from those series of half page of summary of the articles into any literature review fairly easily. It also is a good habit to recall core idea of various articles. Second habit you should develop is trying to be ready to expose even if it's half-baked idea to larger audiences. Many Indian students and early career researchers, I felt they feel a bit more conscious about not sharing their idea because somebody else might build on that or copy that idea. I don't think that's a good apprehension, because if you have developed an idea, you have some background around it. Even if you share the idea, that background is still with you. So it's not easy to copy the idea smoothly in social sciences. So, but on contrary, if you share those ideas with other people, they can give you early feedback. You can build upon their feedback and strengthen your ideas over time. If you develop this habit, you are able to create lots of nuanced contribution to literature.
So finally, what continues to motivate you as a researcher and today, and what about the possibilities of the future?
I have not forgotten my early childhood, which was very challenging in terms of lack of resources. So when I become slightly better off, it was always in back of my mind to contribute back to society. As a geologist, I traveled and I financially contributed to people who are marginalized. Couldn't do much in terms of academic and intellectual contribution. But once I came to academic environment, I always try to contribute back to society through intellectual contribution as well. And that's my single important motivator, to be able to go to villages and see marginalization, and in whatever way I can support. If I can support financially, I do that. If I cannot support financially, I use academically or intellectually or in policy advocacy. And I also engage as a volunteer for multiple organizations which are not my research sites, because I want to keep my research separate from my voluntary activity, but I engage in lots of voluntary activity in multiple contexts.
So last but not the least, how did you find IMT Hyderabad?
It's a wonderful campus, although my stay is very short, but I was able to explore it. It's a green. My expectation was this being a slightly semi-arid area, it wouldn't be as green, but it's wonderful green. There are enthusiastic participant, faculty and students. I had the opportunity to do one research seminar and workshop on qualitative research, and I find the participants very engaged, asking very interesting questions, intellectually stimulating as well as nuanced. So I think IMT has very bright future if we continue in this trend, engage PhD student, engage early career researcher in intellectual interaction and transaction with either external or within themselves as well. I hope the IMT has a very bright intellectual future.
Thank you very much, Professor Israr. It was a wonderful meeting you, and I hope that this collaboration with IMT Hyderabad continues.
Thank you so much for invitation and doing everything, all organizing and all. I would love to come back again and again here and contribute to intellectual engagement and interaction.
Thank you.